Dogman of Autumn Woods. Dean Smith, a native of Boulder, Colorado, had always been an outdoor enthusiast. Boulder, known for its stunning flatirons and the majestic Rocky Mountains, was a haven for hikers and nature lovers. Dean grew up exploring the trails and camping under the stars, so when his friends suggested a camping trip in the autumn woods, he eagerly agreed. The group of friends, consisting of Dean, Sarah, Mike, and Lisa, set out on a crisp autumn morning. The leaves had turned vibrant shades of red, orange, and yellow, creating a picturesque backdrop for their adventure. They hiked deep into the woods, far from the beaten path, and set up camp near a small, serene lake. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the friends gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and laughter. Dean couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He had heard tales of a creature known as the Dogman, a half-man, half-dog beast that prowled these woods. The stories were often dismissed as mere folklore, but something about the stillness of the night made him uneasy. The first encounter happened just as the fire began to die down. Dean heard a rustling in the bushes and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at them from the darkness. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature stepped into the light, revealing its grotesque form. It stood on two legs, covered in matted fur, with the head of a snarling dog. The Dogman. The friends screamed and scrambled to their feet. The Dogman let out a bone-chilling howl and lunged at them. Dean grabbed a burning log from the fire and swung it at the creature, managing to wound it. The Dogman yelped and retreated into the shadows, but Dean knew it wasn't gone for good. "We need to get out of here," Dean said, his voice trembling. "Now." They quickly packed up their gear and began their frantic journey out of the woods. The path was treacherous, with roots and rocks threatening to trip them at every step. The Dogman stalked them from the shadows, its eyes glowing in the darkness. As they made their way through the dense forest, Dean's thoughts drifted to his family. He remembered his father's stories about the Dogman, told around the campfire when he was a child. His mother, always the voice of reason, would reassure him that it was just a story. But now, faced with the reality of the creature, Dean wished he could hear her comforting words again. The group pressed on, their fear driving them forward. They reached a narrow ravine, and as they carefully made their way across, the Dogman attacked again. This time, it targeted Mike, dragging him into the darkness. The others could only watch in horror as their friend disappeared, his screams echoing through the trees. With heavy hearts, they continued their escape. The forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing longer and darker. Dean led the way, his mind racing with thoughts of survival. He knew they had to reach the main trail before the Dogman caught up with them again. Finally, after what felt like hours, they emerged from the woods and stumbled onto the main trail. They didn't stop running until they reached their car, parked at the edge of the forest. They piled in and sped away, the haunting howls of the Dogman fading into the distance. As they drove back to Boulder, Dean couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over him. He had lost a friend to the creature, and the memories of that night would haunt him forever. The Dogman was no longer just a story. It was a terrifying reality. Stalked by the Unknown. Michael Russell grew up in Lawrence, Kansas, a charming college town known for the University of Kansas, the vibrant Massachusetts street, and its historical ties to the Civil War. He loved the endless fields that stretched beyond the city and the warm, tight-knit community. Growing up, Michael was a typical Midwesterner, friendly, pragmatic, and deeply rooted in family traditions. His dad had taught him to shoot a BB gun in their backyard when he was 10, and his mom was the kind of person who never let anyone leave the house without a hug and a sandwich. But those memories felt distant as he and his 3 closest friends, Sam, Jordan, and Clara, embarked on their summer road trip. Their destination was a sprawling national park in Oklahoma, but along the way, they decided to take an unexpected detour to a small town to refuel and explore. The town one wasn't on their itinerary, and its name, Pine Hollow, was unfamiliar to all of them. It was midday when they pulled into a rundown gas station at the edge of the town. The station's peeling paint and the ancient pump handles told stories of neglect. Michael went inside to pay and grab some snacks. The cashier, an older man with a weathered face, stared at him with unsettling intensity. "Y'all shouldn't linger too long," the man said as he rang up Michael's purchases. "The woods around here. Strange things happen." Michael chuckled nervously, not wanting to show he was rattled. He'd grown up hearing local legends back in Kansas, but they were just that. Stories. After the gas station stop, the group decided to spend a few hours in the area, intrigued by the nearby hiking trails advertised on a faded billboard. The woods were dense and quiet, with the occasional rustle of leaves breaking the eerie stillness. As they ventured deeper into the forest, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He remembered the strange look the cashier had given him, and unease settled in his chest. Then came the first encounter. It was Clara who noticed it first, a flicker of movement between the trees. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Michael squinted into the shadows. At first, he saw nothing, but then it appeared. A hunched figure, pale and lanky, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. Its eyes reflected the sunlight like an animal's, but they were disturbingly human in shape. Michael froze. He'd seen something like this before, not in real life, but in a survival horror game he'd played obsessively in high school. In the game, the creature was called the Stalker, a name that felt unnervingly appropriate now. "It's just an animal," Sam said, though he didn't sound convinced. The creature tilted its head in an almost curious manner before vanishing into the underbrush. The group stood in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. "We should go back to the car," Michael suggested, his voice tight. As they retraced their steps, the creature began to stalk them. They heard its footsteps, light but deliberate, trailing them from a distance. At one point, they came across a mutilated deer carcass, its ribs exposed like jagged branches. Clara gasped, and Jordan muttered a string of curses. By the time they made it back to the car, dusk was settling. Relief washed over them as Michael turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and they sped away. But the relief was short-lived. A mile down the road, the car shuddered to a stop. The engine was dead. Stranded, they decided to spend the night in a clearing they had passed earlier. The plan was simple: wait until morning, and then hike back to the gas station for help. They built a fire, its light casting long shadows across the trees. Michael found himself thinking about his family. His dad would have known exactly what to do in this situation. He'd always been calm under pressure. His mom, on the other hand, would have probably insisted they sing campfire songs to keep their spirits up. The thought made Michael's chest ache. The night was long and harrowing. They heard the creature circling their camp, its guttural growls sending shivers down their spines. At one point, it charged at the edge of the firelight but retreated when Michael brandished a flaming branch. "I can't take this anymore," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "We just need to make it till dawn," Michael replied, though he wasn't sure he believed it. When morning came, they set off toward the gas station, their nerves frayed, but their resolve unbroken. The creature didn't seem deterred by daylight. It continued to shadow them, visible in fleeting glimpses. The trail led them to a narrow river crossing. As they waded through the waist-deep water, the creature attacked. It lunged at Sam, dragging him under. Michael and Jordan fought to pull him free, but it was too late. Sam's screams echoed in Michael's ears as they stumbled onto the far bank. "We have to keep moving," Jordan said, his face pale and grim. Hours later, they reached the gas station, battered and terrified. The cashier was gone, but another car was parked outside. They begged the driver for help and piled into the back seat. As the car sped away, Michael looked out the window. The creature stood at the edge of the woods, watching them with those unblinking, reflective eyes. Michael leaned back, his body trembling. He knew he'd never forget what had happened in Pine Hollow. The creature wasn't just a story or a game. It was real, and it had taken one of his closest friends. As they left the town behind, Michael whispered a silent promise to himself. He would find out what the creature was, no matter how long it took. The Wendigo of Autumn Pines. Damian Rambo loved his hometown of Boulder, Colorado. Nestled against the breathtaking Flatirons, Boulder was a paradise for outdoor enthusiasts. Hiking, rock climbing, and mountain biking weren't just pastimes, they were a way of life. Damian had grown up exploring the rugged trails and dense woods surrounding the city, developing a love for nature. But for all its beauty, Boulder was also steeped in its share of ghost stories and eerie legends, something Damian had mostly dismissed. Now, in his early 20s, Damian was embarking on an autumn road trip with his closest friends, Ryan, Carla, and Ava. They were heading through the Rocky Mountain back roads toward a cabin they'd rented for a weekend getaway. The air was crisp, the leaves a kaleidoscope of red and gold, and the excitement of the open road made them all feel invincible. They hadn't planned on stopping in Autumn Pines, a tiny mountain town nestled in a shadowy valley, but when Ryan's car started sputtering, they had no choice. The single gas station looked as ancient as the town itself, with a faded wooden sign swinging on rusty hinges. Damian stayed by the car while Ryan went to talk to the attendant. Ava leaned against the hood, gazing at the surrounding forest. "This place feels off," she said. Carla laughed nervously. "Yeah, like it's stuck in time or something. Let's just get gas and go." Ryan came back, shaking his head. "The guy says we should stick around for a while. Apparently, the road ahead gets tricky after dark." "Great," Damian muttered, already uneasy. But they decided to take the advice, figuring it wouldn't hurt to rest and explore for a bit. The group wandered through Autumn Pines, its quaint charm tinged with an eerie stillness. The few locals they saw were reserved, watching them with wary eyes. Damian couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Late in the afternoon, they decided to hike a nearby trail that promised stunning views of the valley. The forest was dense and quiet, the only sounds coming from their crunching footsteps and the occasional caw of a crow. As they ventured deeper, the sense of unease grew stronger. Then they saw it. At first, Damian thought it was a trick of the light, a skeletal figure standing impossibly still between the trees. But as he focused, the details became horrifyingly clear. The creature was gaunt, its skin stretched tight over its bones, with elongated limbs and hollow, glowing eyes. Antlers jutted from its skull-like head, and its mouth was a jagged maw that seemed too wide. "What the hell is that?" Ava whispered, her voice barely audible. The creature moved, lurching forward with an unnatural gait. Damian's breath caught in his throat. He'd seen something like this before, not in real life, but in a survival horror game he'd played obsessively in high school. "A Wendigo! Run!" he shouted, snapping out of his paralysis. They bolted back toward the trailhead, the creature letting out a guttural scream that froze Damian's blood. He glanced back to see it bounding after them, faster than anything he'd ever seen. They made it back to the car, but the engine refused to start. Ryan frantically turned the key, but it was no use. The Wendigo was nowhere in sight, but they all knew it was still out there, watching. "Let's get to higher ground," Damian said, his voice shaking. "We can wait it out until morning." Carrying what supplies they could, they climbed a rocky incline and found a small clearing surrounded by thick trees. They built a fire, its crackling warmth providing little comfort against the oppressive darkness. Damian sat close to the flames, clutching a thick branch he'd fashioned into a makeshift weapon. As the hours dragged on, Damian's thoughts drifted to his family. His mom, a wildlife photographer, had always told him to respect the wilderness and its mysteries. His dad, a history buff, had once shared a story about the Wendigo, a cautionary tale from Native American folklore. Damien had laughed it off at the time, but now the memory sent chills down his spine. The Wendigo's cries echoed through the forest, each one closer than the last. The firelight danced on their terrified faces as they huddled together. "I don't think it's afraid of the fire," Carla whispered, her voice trembling. "Then we have to keep moving," Damien said, his jaw set. At first light, they descended the rocky slope and started toward the town. The forest seemed alive, every rustling leaf and snapping twig setting their nerves on edge. They were halfway to the gas station when the Wendigo attacked. It came from the shadows, its clawed hand snatching Ryan before anyone could react. He screamed as it dragged him into the underbrush. Damien and Ava tried to follow, but Carla pulled them back. "We can't fight it," she sobbed. Damien wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew she was right. The Wendigo was faster, stronger, and far more cunning than they could ever hope to be. By the time they stumbled into the gas station, they were battered and broken. The attendant was gone, but a trucker parked outside agreed to give them a ride. As they drove away, Damien stared out the window, his thoughts racing. The Wendigo had taken Ryan, and nothing would ever erase the horror of that night. As they left Autumn Pines behind, Damien vowed to learn everything he could about the creature. If it was real, there had to be a way to stop it. The memory of Ryan's screams haunted him, but so did a sliver of determination. The Wendigo was out there, and Damien wasn't going to let it win.